start, I want to give kudos to the worship team. Again, you guys are great. You've got a great voice. So this has been an interesting week for me. Been a lot of challenges, and somebody didn't want me to give this message, so it's been extra challenging for me. But God's good all the time. So I'm here by the grace of God. So April the 7th, 1996 was just on schedule to be a normal day, just an ordinary day, but it happened to be a Sunday, and it happened to be Easter Sunday, which at that point in my life I had been pretty much regularly attending church with my wife. I don't know, maybe a year. I don't really remember how long, but I'd go most Sundays, and but I was mainly going to check a box and make her happy. I wasn't really going to get much out of church, and occasionally I would listen to the message and get something out of it. But we were meeting in a church actually down the street from here at the Oak Mountain Middle School in the cafeteria, and in the cafeteria was this huge room. Like these walls were like taller than these walls, and it was really long, and there were cinder blocks in the walls. And I was amazed that a lot of times I would get distracted rather than listen to the sermon. I would try to figure out how many cinder blocks there were in the wall. And they were kind of stacked counter. It wasn't just like a square up. You had to like, some were this way and this was stacked. And so it was fun. It was a fun math problem. But occasionally I'd get something out of the message, but that was more of the rare thing. But this particular Sunday was going to be different for me. I was coming to be set free. And Jesus said, I've come to set the captives free. And of course, at that time, that Sunday, I didn't know that verse or didn't understand any of that. But I knew that I wanted Jesus in my life as I went to church that morning. I wasn't going to count cinder blocks. I was there to accept Jesus into my life. But if you knew me back then and kind of prior to that, you might be wondering, well, why would a person like me want to hang out with Jesus and go to church and all that? Because prior to that, I was, this would be a good way to describe my personality. I'll try to be nicer if you try to be smarter. And so I was very condescending, very judgmental, very harsh. I didn't need God in my life. I was a very prideful person. I didn't need anybody to help me. And I always thought Christians were weak people. Why would I want to be part of that? I harbored bitterness. I was angry at times, and I would lash out at my wife. We'd have these simple discussions, and if she didn't come across smart, I wasn't very nice. And so didn't understand forgiveness. I was really lost. And the problem is I didn't even know it. I thought I was pretty smart and pretty cool dude. But this process I just didn't wake up April the 7th, 1996 and say, okay, I'm going to be a Christian. It's a process that takes a while. And as Pastor Miguel said a few weeks ago, sometimes it takes a while for things to sink in. So I grew up, my dad was in the Air Force. He traveled around. We have a fellow Air Force brat I met this morning, Nancy. So we kind of, another Air Force brat. Yay for Air Force brats, military brats. And so I grew up, we went to church, went to a Catholic church pretty regularly, every Easter and every Christmas. And when I first started dating my turned out to be wife, girlfriend, she would ask me, will you go to church with me? And I thought that's what she was talking about. I thought she was thinking Easter and Christmas. I was thinking, yeah, I can do that. That's not a big deal. And so I say yes, and she hears yes, so she thinks, she's got a good husband on board, and you really know what she was getting into. But I had a great family, great home life. I learned a lot of basic values there, and but I didn't have any concept of Christianity. I had 5 goals essentially. Number one is I was all about fun. If there was fun to be had, I was going to be either leading it or a part of it somehow. This is when I was in college. Went to Alabama, and had just beaten Ohio State in the Sugar Bowl, 35-6, and I'm on my buddy's shoulder celebrating, and I was having fun that day. Another goal I had was to make tons of money. I wanted to be a millionaire, and I didn't really know why. I just wanted to have a lot of money. I wanted to have a cool car, so I had a car just like this, a 1982 Porsche 911 Targa. And I wanted to have a hot girlfriend, so that was my girlfriend, which ultimately became my wife. And I wanted to own my own business. So in 1987, July of 1987, starting July the 10th, I quit my job, where I was making the money to buy the Porsche, and sold the Porsche, got married on July the 14th, and started a new business on the 13th. So all in 5 days. It was a pretty fast week. So as I got into this business thing, I was a workaholic. I worked 7 days a week, as many hours a day as I could. I didn't believe sleep was really that necessary. I thought sleep was for dead people, and you could always catch up on sleep later on. So I worked as much as I could. I had a saying that you must do the most productive thing at every given moment. So I was working because I was trying to make money, and that was what I did. And so I'd come home late at night. This would have been in the late 80s, I guess, early 90s. And I would watch TV to kind of wind down, and I was like an infomercial junkie. This is before Google and Amazon and all these things that you millennials are used to nowadays. We didn't have the internet back in those days. In fact, I'm not really sure how I ordered stuff, but stuff would show up on the doorstep, and Carrie would know that I had been on the infomercial channel again. But then occasionally I would switch back and forth, and on the late night TV was this guy, a evangelist preacher called Benny Hinn, and I was just fascinated with his ministry, and that he would travel around the country, and his events were broadcast on TV, and people would come to his events in wheelchairs and have various sicknesses and ailments, and he would lay hands on them, and they would be healed. I was like, wow, that's pretty cool. I wasn't sure, is that real? And but he was early planting seeds and get me thinking about Christianity. And then another person that I loved to listen to was Zig Ziglar. He was a great motivational speaker, and he was a Christian, and they had lots of Christianity interlaced throughout his message. And so it was funny because occasionally I would quote some of this Christian stuff to Carrie, and she'd go, hmm? So these seeds were being planted, and of course I didn't really know what was going on. I was more interested in just working. And so another influence was my wife Carrie, and so she would try to entice me to go to church, and so hopefully I'd hear a message or hear something that was meaningful. But the one way that she would get me to come pretty regularly was when church would have these covered dish lunches after church. And I love to eat, so she would say, hey, we're having covered dish lunch today. And so, but I had to sit through the sermon to get to the lunch, which was okay because it was worth it. I could count the cinder blocks. So as I sort of was getting these seeds planted by Benny Hinn and Zig Ziglar and some sermons, I'd listen to some stuff, and then Carrie would try to talk to me about stuff. What really kind of, I guess, pushed me over the edge was this concept of prayer. Now, early on, I was a skeptic. I thought prayer was like some sort of hocus-pocus magic thing, and in fact, I would challenge my wife. I said, well, if you can pray, this prayer stuff really works. Why don't you ask God what the lottery numbers are? And so we'll get the winning lottery numbers. We'll go over to Georgia, get the winning tickets. We'll be millionaires. And she was like, well, it doesn't work like that. But I was like, well, what good is it then? But later on, I found out that's not really how it works. So if you're expecting to win a lottery number, prayer is not the way to do it. Has to be God's plan. But then the first evidence where I saw it firsthand, I saw prayer actually do something I thought was meaningful, which that was all I was always about. Is that meaningful or not? First thing I saw was we had this roommate that Carrie invited to live with us, this girl named Teresa. And so Teresa says, well, shouldn't you ask your husband if I can move in? She goes, no, he's never here. He works all the time and he won't care anyway, which was all true. So Teresa moved in with us. I think one day I came home, I go, who's that? She goes, oh, that's Teresa. She's our new roommate. And so this goes on for months, and as far as I'm concerned, it's fine because I'm not there most of the time. And then after, 8 or 10 months or whatever, Teresa's starting to wear and carry a little bit. So she's telling me, she says, Teresa's too much for me. I'm like, well, tell her to move out. She's like, well, no, I can't do that. I don't have the heart to do it. And I'm like, well, I'll tell her to move out. She's like, no, just, I'm praying about it. And so I'm like, well, okay. When you want to solve the problem, give it to me. I'll tell her to move out. So this continues on, and it's like once a week she's telling me, I can't deal with Teresa anymore. And I go, I'll tell her to move out. And it just kind of keeps going. And then one day, a little more background on Teresa. Growing up, her parents were always treated her second class. She was like a redheaded stepchild, and her parents would ask her, why can't you be like your sister or your brother and be successful in all this? And so you're such a loser. And so Teresa always was beat down by her parents emotionally and mentally. And they almost didn't like her, really. And so, anyway, somewhere in there, I think it was a Monday, if I remember right. I was leaving for work, and Carrie's telling me again that she can't deal with Teresa. I'm like, well, I'll tell her to move out. She goes, no. She goes, I'm praying about it. God is moving. God's going to do something with this. I'm like, okay, whatever. So I go to work, come home. I think it was the next day. I think it was a Tuesday morning, if I remember right. She calls me about mid-morning, and she goes, you won't guess what happened. I go, what? Because Teresa's mother called her and apologized for all the years and all the way they had beat her up emotionally and everything. And she said that her mom and dad, wanted to make it up to her by buying her a fully furnished condo. And they'd already bought it. They'd already closed the deal. And they could move in on Friday. She could move in on Friday. I'm like, no way. That's impossible. Because I was living the Teresa thing, and there's no way that her parents would do that, but they did. So I was kind of like amazed that would happen. So that was kind of the first little data point that I had that was at least interesting to me. There's really no other explanation. And the second thing that really got my attention, this is my lovely wife. I think we were at a Halloween party or something. And she had this weird heartbeat. And it was 100% of the time you could listen to it, and it had this weird skip to it, always. And it would keep her awake a lot of times at night. And she said, I can't sleep because of my heart. And so one day she goes to this prayer meeting thing, or I don't remember what it was exactly. She comes home that night, and she's all excited, and she says, I had my heart prayed for tonight, and I've been healed. I'm like, what are you talking about? She goes, yeah, they called me up and said, hey, somebody needs their heart healed. And so I went up there and they put hands on her and prayed for her. She felt this heat flash go through her or whatever happened, and she had been healed. So I'm like, I don't believe it. So I listened to her heart, and it had a perfect heartbeat. I was like, wow. That was cool. So now I'm starting to think about this stuff a little bit. This is better than the lottery number, really, So then fast forward, we're in late 95, early 96. So when I started this company, it was a company that built software for the paper industry. And we had a customer, really big customer in Philadelphia, that was starting to use our software. It was a 100-user system. Our typical big user was like 15. So to go to 100 is like a really big difference. And we had written a whole bunch of custom programs and all kinds of stuff for these guys. And the software really wasn't ready, but they had, upper management was pushing to get this done. And so the first go-live was scheduled for the first Monday in January of 1996. Well, there's something wrong with their servers, and I'm pleading with this guy. I said, look, this will be a disaster if you turn this thing on with these servers the way they are. So he said, okay. So we got some new servers in there. We delayed it another month. And so the first Monday in February was the next scheduled go live. Well, it turned out that was the biggest snowstorm in Philadelphia history hit. In 24 hours, they got like 39 inches of snow. And it shut the city down, froze the Delaware River, and even the city that's equipped for snow couldn't handle this. So we got another month. So now, even though March the 4th was the next scheduled date, we still weren't ready, but that was going to be the day. So we go along, we turn the software on, and they couldn't send invoices out for the first 2 weeks. And for a $100 million company, the CEO was kind of upset with us. I couldn't quite understand what the problem was, but yeah, no, I'm kidding. So we figured that out and everything. So we rolled to the end of the month, and it's early April, and they're trying to close their books out. And so they're looking at the general ledger and what's in the inventory, and we're missing $400,000 worth of rolls. This is a picture of what our customer's inventory looks like. So our software tracks these rolls, where it is in the warehouse and through the production process, and tracks labor and overhead and paper cost and all this. Anyway, somehow our software had $400,000 worth of inventory had vanished. Boom. And the guy was upset again. And so this is like the first week of April. April the 7th is Sunday, is Easter Sunday coming up. So we were scheduled to leave on Thursday night, which was the day before Good Friday. Scheduled to fly out at like 5 o'clock. And so Wednesday, we had been spending the last 3 days trying to find this $400,000 for the CFO. And we had uncovered stuff and looked, and we couldn't find it. And in my former life, I was a CPA, and so I can reconcile stuff. Anyway, something was wrong with the inventory. I don't know what happened. It was a disaster. So I told the CFO, I said, look, we're leaving tomorrow night. We're going home for the weekend. And he says, well, if you guys leave, don't come back. We're canceling our contract with you, and we're not going to pay you all the money that we owe you, which was a lot of money at the time. I don't remember how much it was, but so we couldn't afford to do that because we couldn't make payroll at the time, and among other things. And so on the way back to the motel that night, we're in a van. There's 6 of us there, driving back to the hotel, and I told everybody, I said, look, we might have to stay here through Easter weekend. And they're good troopers. They're like, oh, we'll pull through this. And but dinner that night was kind of somber, kind of quiet. Everybody was reality of, because we've been working 7 days a week, 12 hours a day. I mean, Catherine knows how these days are. She's works with me now. And back then, she wasn't on this team, but she knows how it goes. And so Thursday morning, I get up, and I'm sharing a room with a guy named James, that you guys know. And so I hopped in the shower, and I get this wild idea. I'm going to try this prayer thing. Right? I've done everything that I know to do. And as prideful and as smart as I think I am, I can't figure out this inventory problem. So I get in the shower it's something like, dear God, I don't know if you're really out there or if you're for real, but I'm down here. I got a couple problems I'd like you to help me with. First of all, if we could figure out this $400,000 problem, that's request number one. And then request number two is I'd like to get home to see my family. So, amen. So I get out of the shower, and I don't really announce to anybody that I've done this. I didn't want to feel like I was weak, right? Like I was giving up. I was asking for help. So I just kept it to myself. But I was actually kind of excited about getting to the plant because I thought, I'm going to run these reports, it's all going to balance, and we're going to go home. It's all going to be perfect. Problem was I had asked for two specific miracles. I'd asked for the $400,000 problem to be fixed, and I wanted to go home to see my family. So it had to be two separate miracles. Anyway, so we get to the plant, I run the reports, and lo and behold, the exact same numbers as the night before. We're still out by $400,000. So I was like, well, so much for prayer, so much for God. We'll just keep chugging along. So as the day progresses, we decide that there's no sense in all six of us staying there. So 3 people were going to go home. So they caught the 5 o'clock flight. There was another flight going out at like 7 o'clock that night, but it was Easter weekend, and flights were booked up. So we were going to probably miss that flight. It was oversold, or overbooked, whatever they called it. And so they get back to the plant, and I'm running the reports and everything. So for whatever reason, I take the exact same reports, and I bring them into the CFO, which I'd done a couple times a day for the past 3 days. Literally the exact same numbers. I give them to him. He's sitting behind his desk, looking at his computer. I guess he had Excel or whatever. He's keying numbers into his computer. And he kind of goes, that's pretty good. I go, what do you mean, what's pretty good? He goes, the inventory. I go, you mean it's balances? He goes, yeah. We're good. I go, he goes, yeah. So of course, me being the CPA accountant, I want to come around behind the desk and see what happened. I mean, how'd that change? But I didn't really want a chance, or he could have made a mistake or something. So I'm just going to go with that. He says, so I said, we're clear to go. He goes, you guys are clear to go. I said, okay. So I go in the other room, and I get the other 2 guys in there, and I said, get your stuff, let's go home. They said, what about? I said, it balances. They had the same reaction I did. Well, how did that happen? I said, I don't know. Let's get out of here before things change. So we packed up our stuff. We get down to the van, and I said, I feel like we should go to the airport. And they're like, well, the flight's overbooked, and it's oversold, and we're not going to get on that flight. I go, I know, but I think we should go to the airport. So we drive to the airport. We turn the van in. We go to the Delta counter, and I said, hey, we're supposed to be on that 5 o'clock flight. I know there's a 7 o'clock flight. Can we get on that flight? And she goes, well, no, it's oversold, overbooked. She goes, let me see what I have available. So she's clicking away on her computer, and then she has this kind of crazy look on her face. She goes, wow, that's crazy. I go, what's that? She goes, there's 3 seats available on this plane together in the reclinable exit row, which is like the best seats in coach. I said, well, can we get those seats? She goes, yeah, I booked, you guys are in there. So we flew home. So all of a sudden, both miracles have been performed in my mind. So I knew on Sunday when we went to church, I didn't care about counting cinder blocks. I was going to have Jesus, invite Jesus into my heart. That's the $400,000 I was missing. And there's the flight that was oversold. So anyway, so we get home. The pastor has the answer call. I go up there. There's a crack addict, I think, right? He's up there in tattered blue jeans, and I'm up there in my dress clothes. And in God's eyes, we're both the same people. So both of us got saved that day. It was an amazing moment of freedom. Like I said, I didn't realize how bound up I was, but that was a good starting point. But then after that, that was kind of like just the starting point, really, because if you looked at the rest of my life, my business life and my home life and all that, business life, in June of 1996, so 2 months after this April deal, I was $700,000 in debt, the company was, that I owed personally. And of that $700,000, $80,000 we owed the IRS for not paying payroll taxes. They were not happy with us for some reason. These people that get unhappy, I don't understand that. But you think, well, how much is in your bank account? Well, we were $1,200 overdrawn in the bank account. So, but that was the good news, actually, because my home life was like a real train wreck. I mean, Carrie and I were argue all the time, and why are we married? And I mean, it's just, I can't describe to you how much turmoil I was in. And then back to the business, I had given away a lot of the stock, so now I'm personally in debt for a company that I don't really own much of. And so how do I get out of this? There was and I wasn't going to declare bankruptcy, but so there was to me, there was no way out of this. And then I had a partner that, that I didn't really agree on how we should do things, and then these fancy venture capital people, and it was a big mess. And then my marriage and family life was a wreck. But I prayed about it, and today I can stand here and say the company has zero debt. I own the company pretty much 100%. I think my wife owns some of the stock or something, but just an amazing testimony to God, because I had no way I could have done all that by myself. And so I'm grateful that God did that. God is, I used to think Christians were weak. Well, really with God, you're coupled with God, you're you on steroids. Doesn't matter how smart or good you are, you're better with God. And I didn't realize that until I went through the process. And as Miguel said, it takes a while for things to sink in. So you slowly but surely eventually get there, and He transforms you. And so now, I think about, rather than think about how much money can I make and how much can I buy a vacation home, spend a bunch of money, being materialistic. I drive a 10-year-old car. It's got a couple 100,000 miles on it, and I don't really care about that, but I'm more focused on fruits of the Spirit: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. I'm not experts at those, but I'm headed that way. I still struggle sometimes with the I'll try being nicer if you try being smarter. But my life is completely different, and I'd be afraid to go back and try to do it on my own and not have God as part of what I'm doing. So if you don't know God, or you're on the fence about it, I highly encourage you to come to church. We don't have cinder blocks in here for you to count. Pastor Miguel's a great pastor. Get some out of his messages. And come to church, come visit us. Turn your life over to God. It's a whole lot easier. Amen.
Thank you. I've gotten to know Tom, as I said earlier, and he has many different stories. If you don't know him and his wife Carrie, I'd encourage you to connect with them and visit with them and invite them over for lunch or go out and get to know them. They're a really great couple. You'll have a great time getting to know him. He's a fantastic storyteller. And if you get him talking about his dad, there's a rabbit trail that'll take a long time to tell, but amazing stories about that life being an Air Force brat. I want to ask you a quick question, because there's something, there was a theme that I heard several times, and just want to ask you about it. So you were a workaholic, self-defined, 7 days a week. Every opportunity was meant to fulfill something.
Yep.
When you came that April 7th, 1996, and you gave your life to Christ, I'm sure, well, what did you notice about the change that would happen in your work life? How did that affect your work life then?
Well, it wasn't something that just you snap your fingers and all of a sudden you're a different person. It takes time to sink in ultimately. But you start shifting your focus away from this drive, this materialistic drive. You got to make all this money, and there's been celebrities that have all the money they could ever spend and still are missing something. They don't have the joy or peace. They're not content, and they, for unknown reasons, they kill themselves. So they're probably don't know God. I don't know any of the situations personally, but there's a lot more to life than money and materialistic things. And so I guess there's a lot of things that have changed, but working all the time is not that important. Our company is we try to have a good balance between work and life, and it's not always about how much money are we making. And I think it's I've shifted more from wanting stuff being inward focused to being more outward focused, and how can I help people. And I've been through a lot of financial troubles, so I feel like I'm well equipped to help people either avoid those situations or make the best of their situation. And so I guess my change has been more from inward focus to more outward focus, and over a period of time, I'm a work in progress. It's a journey, and looking forward to the next 30 or 40 years, whatever I have left here.
Amen. And your beautiful wife is here. So God saved your marriage. He kind of turned a whole bunch of things around, didn't he?
Yes, we did. Yes, he did.
Awesome. Well, listen, I truly get to know him and his wife, but, it's quite possible that some of the stuff in his story is relatable to different aspects of our lives. I remember myself, I was pretty much a workaholic and almost put myself into the grave working for Jesus. So this happens in the world, in the world of normal work, of some people would term secular work, open your own business or something outside of the church, and it's also similar in the church. You can be so driven by something that's not really God, not really His best for you, and will hurt you. It can actually hurt you. So I know several of the things that he had experienced. I kind of experienced them after knowing Jesus, and really what I wanted for him to share his story was there's two really kinds of people. I think there's two kinds of people in the world: people who know Jesus and people who don't know Jesus. And those who know Jesus, you might be driven for a completely different reason, trying to gain approval, trying to gain approval from God or from someone, or trying to do all these things to check off all the right boxes and say, hey, I'm a good Christian. And the motivation may be completely off. Had nothing to do with your relationship with Jesus, has everything to do with you. And that's not the right motivation. Or maybe you don't know Jesus at all. You're like Tom was on April the 5th, 1996, when you were not sure. You didn't know who Jesus is. And you're sitting here today, you're thinking, how do I get to know him? How do I start the journey with him? Well, it starts when we say, I want to trust you, Jesus. Remember what Jesus said. What is eternal life? To know God and the one God sent, Jesus. That's what eternal life is. So we begin eternal life when we begin to say, God, I want to know you, and I want to know your son, Jesus. And Tom did that. Carrie did that. I did that.